Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 48 of Nautel's Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. I got that all out without choking on it even once. We're going to call that a small miracle. I'm Jeff Welton, as always, and today we're going to have some fun. I've got one of our I mean, Mr. Optimism, Mr. Positivity. He's the upbeat guy that gets us all singing and dancing. But I've got Brian Irwin, our head of operations. See, I couldn't get through that without choking it. Brian, welcome and thanks for being with us today.
Amazing introduction, Jeff. I appreciate that. Mr. Optimism thing, that's awesome.
Well, so the reason I say that, because of course today's topic is lean manufacturing, and you do get really excited about that, and it is fun to hear you talk about it. So I think we're going to have a great day.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate you having me on.
So the cool thing is what we're going to try and do, and this is where you folks in the audience are going to come in. We're going to try and think of ways that this could apply to radio station operations and broadcast facilities as well. So by all means, as we go through this, if you can see a situation where, hey, we could make this work with our scenario, throw it into the questions, and oh yes, get to the mandatory housekeeping slide. So there is a place to type the questions. If you're new to this, then by all means, feel free to type question in there, hit submit, and I've got the little screen right here to my left. I'll bring them up and we'll make it part of the conversation. If you've got a microphone and you're not shy, hit the little hand wavy icon. I'm happy to unmute you and make you part of the conversation. And like I said, we're just going to have a lot of fun. If you are an SBE member, and I see we've got some here in the list. I know Wayne Pacina, our president's on the list. Wayne has just been a lot of fun to have on these as well. So Wayne, shout out to you. If you're not an SBE member, why not? All right. Definitely, if you are and you're certified, this does qualify for half of a recertification point under category I of the research schedule. So write it down in your list of whatever you do to keep track of that stuff. You know me, I'm old fashioned. It goes on my analog PDA, and we carry away with that. All right, so lean manufacturing. Now Brian, of course, with us, we tie it into the continuous improvement, which is sort of related, but not really. So tell me a little bit about the whole concept of continuous improvement, if you could.
Well, you know, I have extensive background in continuous improvement and lean methodologies. I grew up, cut my teeth in Southwestern Ontario, Tier 1 automotive supply. So, you know, in the mid 90s and early 2000s, big push from Tier 1 automotive suppliers to get involved with lean manufacturing and Six Sigma because of the influence from Toyota manufacturing. It was almost a requirement that suppliers to the automotive industry were pursuing these methodologies around lean and Six Sigma. So Lean Six Sigma is a combination of two team-focused improvement methodologies. You know, lean comes from Japan, Toyota production system, focused on elimination of waste, efficiencies, concepts of value-added versus non-value-added activities, looking to fix, you know, connections between process steps. And Six Sigma is Motorola, General Motors, more statistical analysis of your problems. So focusing on variation reductions, using statistical tools to drive improvements in a couple different methodologies, but really we focus on lean. Lean is it's a lot more employee focused, you know, stuff you can do on the shop floor to drive waste out of your business. And like Jeff said, you know, I'm a very optimistic guy. I spent 4 years after university. I worked in a plant. You know, I was running a forge press, and probably the best 4 years I spent is being a part of a workforce and understanding what it takes to put 8 hours of work in a day. You know, what it's like to drop your lunch pail in the cafeteria in the morning and go work, and you know, all the pain points that are involved in being a part of a workforce. You're running a forge press or loading a shot peening machine or loading a paint line, and really built kind of a servant leadership type mindset that, you know, your employees are really important, and really important to a point where you should be talking to them every day about how to make their processes better. So that's kind of where the lean stuff comes in.
I'm going to interrupt real quick. Like one of the things that caught my eye is that there's a lot of talk about just in time, and just in time, of course, is like talking about reducing asset costs by not having stuff that you don't need on the shelf. And Lean mentions that too, but on the other hand, Lean also focuses on making very sure that you do have the stuff you do need on the shelf, and that's kind of, it's a fine line sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the just-in-time mindset through lean really comes from the Toyota production system, and that concept is very focused on automotive part supply. And that just-in-time mindset comes from tier one automotive, like the OEMs not wanting to have millions of dollars worth of inventory sitting at each location, pulling it from across the road from the assembly plant into the assembly plant. They really put the onus on the suppliers to manage that process so that inventory was on the road at all times, and they were using trucks on the 401 in Ontario or on the interstate highways in the States. Loaded trucks was really their inventory, and it put a lot of pressure on tier one automotive suppliers to get good at just in time. And it's certainly not the big focus of what we do at Nautel. Our focus is trying to make sure we got the right stuff in adequate quantities, based off of forecasted demand. So
Right.
when it comes to the inventory waste, we focus our inventory, our work on any inventory waste reduction is not focused on the quantity so much. It's more focused on, do we have the right stuff? And if we need larger quantities of things to make sure that we can supply, then that's what we focus on.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because, of course, these days everybody hears about all the part shortages, and I've got folks from down all around down toward like Louisville, for example, sending me pictures of parking lots full of GM trucks waiting for one IC type of deal. And so, the lean philosophy in a lot of ways will tend to, in a situation like that, we tend to focus on increasing stock rather than
Correct.
decreasing so that we have it when we need it.
Correct.
And
And
that's
I have lots of connections still to the automotive world, like lots of friends and former coworkers that are still in that field, and talking to exactly what you're talking about assembly plants that aren't able to make parts or not able to make vehicles right now, and the impact that has down the supply chain to the tier one automotive suppliers, where they're shutting factories down because they've got nowhere to ship their parts because assembly plants aren't working. So certainly a very unique time right now in the world of supply chain across the world.
right. Now, you were talking like on lean, one of the focuses was on identifying waste. And so there's a lot of places where we do typically, and I mean, it could be something as silly as having to turn around to pick up a part in a repetitive process on a machine.
Yeah, exactly. And these are the 8 wastes, and the one you're speaking of is motion. And it's really amazing when you're present in a work cell, and you watch how your staff operates on a daily basis in the tasks and the repetitive tasks they do, the amount of walking that they do from one step to the next, or the amount of walking that's involved when a product goes from this operation to the next one. And there's analogies that Jeff and I have talked about before about, we're almost, it's like at times you're paying people to not get their data up on their step counter. You know what I mean? Like, you see certain operations in certain facilities, and not just our own, where people need to be in pretty good shape because they're getting 10 or 12,000 steps in over the course of a day, just walking around trying
And I
to
mean, that makes this thing happy, but not so much the average person.
Yeah, so in lean terms, that would be a waste. That waste of motion is, any unnecessary movement by your people. And every time you can reduce the amount of motion that your employees are making, then they're actually spending more time working and less time on this waste. So that's really the 8 wastes in a nutshell. They're defined by, there they are, but the more you can reduce or eliminate these wastes, the more time your staff is actually spent working. And
Right. And you'd had a comment before about non-value added, and I mean, bringing that to the radio station, relative to the revenue of the station, time spent changing the oil in the GM or the sales manager's car for a broadcast engineer is probably considered a non-revenue added activity. You're not contributing
Correct.
to the bottom line of the station. And that's kind of cool because, of course, if you look at the broadcast or the description for a typical broadcast engineer, it'll have everything from fixing heels to repairing plumbing to things totally not part of broadcast. And a lot of times you can, especially these days, make a ROI statement or a return on investment statement as to why that stuff doesn't contribute to the bottom line of the station. And it might be an argument against especially some of the more financially oriented managers as to why sometimes it's cheaper to hire somebody else to do that sort of work.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, and I think that's important to understand the concept of value added and non-value added, and it's a big part of the lean concept. We have for example, you have highly skilled staff, test technicians that you're relying on to do highly skilled activities. But are they doing, are you allowing them to do the highly skilled activities, and what non-value added stuff are they doing that's stopping them from spending more of their time doing the value added stuff? And, there's lean people will say, lean gurus will say that 90% of what your workers do in the course of a day is a waste. Really, there's a very small portion of their workday where they're actually creating value for the company. So you have to understand what that value is, and then you have to understand what non-value added activities are they doing that are required. So in our world, or in a manufacturing world, you got to clock into jobs. You have to make sure that your time's being charged appropriately for financial purposes. So you probably can't eliminate that. So that's non-value added necessary. So you want to try and minimize that as much as possible. And then the non-value added activities that you don't need to be doing at all, you just got to work to try and eliminate them.
Right. And sometimes it's a fine line. I mean, I take a lot of support calls, which from a sales perspective are not technically value added, but they are insofar as they increase my value as a sales resource. So, again, sometimes you got to use some judgment in this stuff too.
Exactly. It's a very fine line because that, you are creating value for the customer in that scenario, right? The customer would view that work that you're doing to help them out from a customer service perspective. They would view that as value-added activities, and technically to a sales function, in your sales role, you may look at that and say, this is not value-added in my scope of work, but in the bigger picture, the amazing value you're creating for the customer is something that needs to be considered.
Well, and that was something that we talked about when we were doing our little run through yesterday, how sometimes you can do something that really improves the efficiency in your facility, but really detracts from it in other parts of the facility. So it definitely, you need the big picture. William Harrison in the comments mentions there's a show called James May's Build a Car in 24 Hours that's available on Prime Video. That'd be US based Prime Video, but that's what VPNs are for, folks. Anyway, he visits a mini plant where they reroute parts delivery by helicopter if necessary to keep the line going. And same deal, if the cost of the solution is outweighed by the benefit that it provides, then it's still the most cost effective in some cases.
Well, honestly, Jeff, when I hear helicopter and automotive supply, I have these bad flashbacks to my days working for Meritor. We were steel industry, relying on steel to make suspension parts, and we were in situations where steel became in very short supply, and we were helicoptering parts from Chatham, Ontario to Toledo, Ohio, and to Detroit, Michigan. We had helicopters landing in our parking lot picking parts up. That's the, you spoke earlier about just in time and the drawbacks of just in time, and you're responsible to keep these assembly plants going. So these helicopters in the automotive world it's actually happened, and I've been a part of that in my past.
Yeah. Now, John Van Milligan mentions one that one station he worked at was next to an electronics parts store. And, these days those are becoming scarcer than hen's teeth, although there are still a few around. I know there's a good one in Milwaukee and there are a couple other ones around. But, but he mentions that with that, the parts store there, they didn't have to stock parts on the shelf. They could just walk next door for most parts. And again, yeah, using the available resources to minimize your own inventories is not a bad idea at all. So this all comes back to the value added versus non-value added, and I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, which I will do because I know what's coming sometimes. But yeah, the big picture item, I mean, that requires input. Like you said, the worker level is important because they know what speeds up their specific process. But it does require looking at the, you know, there have been times where we've suggested, well, if we made this change to a chassis, it would really make it easier to assemble. And then we'll look at it and say, yeah, but it'd make it a real dog to repair. And so, you know, those come into the effect as well.
Yeah, 100%, Jeff. And I think, you know, as part of the discipline and the culture that we're developing here, you know, we have, you know, activities inside of work cells that, you know, we're trying to put onus on our hourly employees to be process engineers, like work on your process constantly, get into a rhythm of finding, you know, just try to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday, and stuff that's within your control to do, you know, move this workbench closer together to eliminate some motion. You know, let's go ahead and do those things. And then the bigger things like you're talking about that could impact other departments, you know, that are going to involve input from sales and marketing and engineering and support sustaining, you know, let's capture them in a different bucket, and we'll make sure that we've got them captured and we're having discussions around those things so that we don't end up making an improvement in one department and then creating a waste in another department. So, you know, it's important part of the culture is that you've got these different wheels of improvement happening. You know, you've got the small improvements, you know, that are within department stuff that can be handled within departments. Then you've got a mechanism of capturing the ideas around the bigger improvements so they can get some review and some love from a bigger group. And then we can make better decisions around, yes, let's go forward with this one after we've got that input from, you know, the other teams that could be affected.
Yeah, and now talking about the process in general, there's a book you recommend that you've shared around at the office a little, and
Yeah, that's it. This is it. This is Paul Akers. You know, just some background. Like I said, I've been through you know, tier one automotive way of trying to introduce lean concepts into an organization. You know, Meritor at the time was the 10th largest parts supplier in the world. Just kind of got mandated that all 128 plants around the world were going to do lean, and you know, that was the corporate mandate. And then, you know, sent a bunch of consultants in and locked our staff in groups of 20 in rooms and trained them on lean concepts, and really never got it off the ground the way it should. And luckily, you know, working for Nautel, you know, Kevin, and, you know, privately held company, we've got our own idea how we want to do this. And, you know, there's myself and some real warriors on my team that have kind of led us to the point we're at. But through that process, we found this book, and just randomly found this book, and it's called 2 Second Lean: How to Grow Your People and Build Your Culture. And Paul Akers he's over the top. Like, he's insanely committed to the way he runs his facility. He's got an awesome website, very open, sharing all of his ideas. You can go to his website, you can look at little improvements he's made in his plant. You can go in there and harvest his ideas and implement them. And I highly recommend. We've shared this book across the organization for about a year and a half or 2 years now. And I would highly recommend it. It's entertaining reading, just how he's built his team and how he built his organization around lean concepts, and how he started into lean, similar to what I talked about. It wasn't working, and he was trying to do textbook lean, you know, the way Toyota manufacturing said to do it, or the Toyota way, and then just found this unique way and built his culture internally. And he's sharing that. And some of the key points is, it's yours. You know, this is how you want to do it. You know, don't follow the textbook, follow some key concepts and make it your own. So
customize it as needed. Yeah, and one of the cool things, and you'd mentioned Kevin. So for the folks that don't know, and I think most people have met him at NAB and other shows, but Kevin Rogers, of course, is our owner, and the advantage of being privately held with a single owner is that, you know, we can sort of play around with stuff like this and get it the way that fits best for you guys and for us, so that so we can do these compromises. It's kind of cool like that. And we've got a bunch of examples coming up in a bit where we'll talk about the employee-driven aspect of it. But we do have 3 copies of the 2-second lean. So in lieu of making a contest on the spur of the moment, because I'm really terrible at that, I decided that I'd give Ed a homework project. Ed, of course, is our disembodied voice, the guy in the background who makes all this stuff happen. Thank you, Ed.
Hey, my
And
pleasure.
Ed is going to go through the attendance archives for the last 48 episodes, counting today. Everybody registered today, whoever the top 2 who have been here for the last 48 are going to get a copy of this. And then we'll randomly pick somebody else from the studio audience for the 3rd copy. And William makes the comment, he speaks in the questions. So yeah, exactly. You know, we'll have a little fun with it, but it is really cool to have the flexibility, because we can look at something. And of course, sometimes when you make a change, there is a cost associated with making a change sometimes. And usually you can present the return on it pretty quickly. But definitely you need to have ownership that will allow you to make that expenditure to begin with. So it's been a whole lot of fun having that kind of leadership to play with. Now, continuous improvement, I said in the beginning, they're associated, but not necessarily, you know, tied together. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know that's a philosophy we've got right down to janitorial staff.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something very important when you were talking about Kevin and the leadership that he's provided around this and other activities. It's very important that we're taking really good care of our people and our staff. And this is a lot about cultural development. It's a lot about, you know, treating your employees with respect and just a humble nature of managing people. You know, Jeff and I talked yesterday about his garage and how, you know, there's some ideas that we've implemented and I'll show you some slides later about some improvements we've made in just in 5S, and Jeff said, well, I should do some of the stuff in my garage. And I was like, yeah, you should, but it's your garage, you know. And I think that's an important concept that, you know, I'm the head of operations, but I don't run the punch presses, and I don't run the press brakes, and I don't run the paint shop. So how the paint shop gets set up and how it gets organized and how it gets efficiently put together, it's important that your employees it's important to us that our employees are driving that activity. So, you know, just from an expectation point of view, we just want our staff to learn and understand what the 8 wastes are, like, and understand that, you know, to the 2 important things is, what are the 8 wastes, you know, what are they, just from learning perspective, and understand that concept of value add, non-value add. So once you've taught your staff to see these wastes, then, you know, they're well suited to go out and identify them and start eliminating them from their daily work. And so the next expectation is, you know, just fix things that are bugging you. You know, think about you're doing your work, and when I reach to get this, it's not there, or if that's bothering you, then let's work on a solution to fix that every day. And let's just try to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday. Yeah. Document your improvements. This is a very important one. We've got multiple locations, and they're all generating great ideas. So we want to get into a habit of documenting our improvements. One, so that we can share them across the organization, share them with other interested parties. You know, if there's companies in the Halifax area that want to talk lean, we've got to start to build our own like library of improvements that we made, and we can start sharing them. And then it's important, you know, up to the senior management level, so that we have people come in and tour the facility. They have items that they can talk to. They've got examples at their fingertips that they can show. This is the difference that this has made. So that's another important expectation.
One of the phrases that Ed threw me in the chat was fix what bugs you. And that really ties to the continuous improvement and the way you set the philosophy up with the employees. So if somebody's seeing some significant waste or something where they're like just beating their head against the table going, man, this is inefficient. They've got the power to make the change and then document it and tell you what they did.
Exactly. Did you just hear my phone ringing?
I heard my phone ringing, but
that was my phone. I completely apologize. But you made a really good point, and that's what it comes down to. You know, it's a very simple concept of fixing what bugs you. I'm slightly distracted there, Jeff. I'm sorry.
all right. I'm going to say you must have something ringing. Your audio is cutting a little bit, so we'll move on. And let's see.
So, can we just talk about one more thing, Jeff, quick? And the other one, if you go back a slide, is let's become process engineers. I think that's a very important concept that we talk about when we're onboarding new employees. That, you know, we're hiring you to be a part of Nautel's operations team, but we really want you to think as a process engineer. So think about step into your work right off the bat and look at things from a process engineer point of view, fresh set of eyes. What would you do differently? Like, let's start talking immediately about things we can do and just come in with that, you know, process engineer mindset that we're very humble in our approach and we're very open to new ideas.
Yeah, and on that, Mark Voris from out in the Midwest, I think Mark's down around Omaha, Nebraska area, and he asks how the lean concept has worked with so many folks working remotely during the pandemic. Are you still able to follow the principles that way? And in a lot of ways, it's actually helped.
I think so too, and that's a really good question. And that's one thing that we've talked about, you know, is how do we stay engaged from a continuous improvement perspective with our employees, you know, that have flipped to a remote work setup. And we've put a lot of effort into it, and right down to, you know, from a CI perspective, but just touch points with them, you know, to remind them of, you know, our desire to get better every day. We spent time early on around how to best set up workstations, you know, what the best, most ergonomic way to set up your desk is. And it's been a challenge for sure, but it hasn't stopped us, you know what I mean? We've continued to plug away at it and make sure we're getting input from those that aren't here.
Right. Now, Mark, if you've got a microphone, I unmuted you on this end. If you unmute it there, I want to talk to you a second or two, because I think there's some ways, especially where we do have so many people working remotely, that this kind of philosophy could be almost applied to remote broadcasting. So yeah, definitely, Mark, if you hit the mute button and turn green, then I'll expect to hear you speak. If you don't, then we'll just assume you're unmicrophoned. Oh, there, you're green, you're good to go. So what about like, for example, with all the remote work, there's a lot of voice tracking. So setting up procedures for loading the automation system remotely.
Yeah, that takes some, getting people to work in a certain process and keep everything consistent with the process involved. I'm thinking in the back of my head, we're talking lean and waste and that sort of thing. And I work for a nonprofit organization with our stations. So lean is pretty important. I mean, we have to be careful that we're not wasting.
Right. And for you guys, it's, yeah, like you say, more important because it's grantee dollars. It's, the folks that rely on you for information are the ones supporting your facility.
Exactly. I've got a call. I got to jump out. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So, that's, yeah, definitely. And that's something that with us, it ties into lean, it ties into our ISO registration, but the documentation and having the actual processes, that's got to be huge, right?
I think that's a very good point. You always want to blame your process, not your people. So if you've got a process well defined in a remote environment, you can document that process. And we've done a lot of events around here. They're called waste walks, and the lean terminology is Gemba walk. But so if you've got a defined process, then you can easily call together a group of people and go through that process step by step and start identifying waste in between the steps. And then once you've got that group together, you can start saying, this we can eliminate. If you look at any process, even if it's remotely and you're just looking at it because you can't be present, you're looking at it through a Teams call or a Zoom call. If you got your process defined, you can look at the steps to get things done, and then you can start identifying potential waste in that process and start, go down a waste elimination exercise in that method. And we've done that, a fair amount with some of our staff working remotely.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be something as simple as, and one of the biggest kinds of waste that we identify is times when something is not being worked on, when it's just sitting there, whether it's an order came in and it's sitting on a desk waiting for contract review or whatever.
Right.
But again, that's another form of waste as opposed to inefficiencies in the operation themselves.
Yeah,
So,
that's if you go back, waste number 4 on the list I provided is waiting, and that's another big one that we've identified and worked hard to eliminate because it's everywhere. It could be in a requisition approval, it could be in a contract review scenario, it could be the sales guys are waiting for contract review to get done, and they're just what is happening right now, and how do we reduce the amount of time it takes to get this from step A to step B. Waiting is a very, very big waste in manufacturing and any other process.
Yep. Moving on, let's see. So in a nutshell, well, there's your 8 wastes again, and yep, waiting number 4. See, now wait a second, I see 7 in that list. What am I missing? We're going to put Brian on the spot with this one.
I did a very good job putting these slides together. Overproduction, overprocessing, motion, waiting, inventory, defects, and lack of employee involvement. That's 8. Transportation is not in there. Sorry.
There you go. I gotta say that's not 8. There,
So,
now we got it.
Transportation in our world would be, if we have to pick parts up and take them from the paint shop into final assembly. So anytime you're moving stuff around, moving your parts around, or that's transportation waste.
Yeah.
Apologize, Jeff, you caught me.
Yeah, William in the background says the 8th one was too wasteful, so it was eliminated from the list.
Imagine we get so good at this, we start eliminating the waste.
Yeah, we leaned lean.
I think but while we're on this slide, I think one of the biggest problems that I noticed in prior efforts to introduce lean is the last one, which is lack of employee involvement. I think that's really, there's a lot of waste that you can make an impact on how things flow, but if you're not addressing the 8th waste in this list, 7th waste, because transportation's missing, but if you're not addressing number 8, then this is where your energy comes from as a leader or as a supervisor or somebody that has staff that reports to them. This is where your energy comes from, is when you start harvesting ideas because you've got good employee involvement, you've built up trust, you've got examples of people, staff of ours that have been here for a long, long time that are now coming forward with ideas, and you're harvesting these ideas, and it provides such a powerful, it's a powerful message to the employee in the world of, it's getting harder and harder to find people. And, if you get employee involvement and engagement, then the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. People want to be involved. There's a reason to be involved. So the most important waste, in my view, is the lack of employee involvement. So if you can work on that, make some headways on that, then things will start falling into place.
I was going to say the rest kind of solves itself.
Exactly.
And, tying to that, there is a whole bunch of just general guidelines. The humble one may be the one I have the biggest challenge with at times. And well, because
I think we all do, Jeff, and I think and we all do, and it's natural because I think people are very proud of what they've done, and as far as being humble, it's always about somebody has put these processes together. Like, this is not about poo-pooing the way things used to be. Let's be humble in our approach, and let's not let's make this an adversarial thing by saying, what were they thinking when they decided that they were going to do things like this? More humble, as in let's explore a better way of doing things.
Yeah. And the other,
that's right in your wheelhouse, Jeff.
Well, yeah, and the other challenge to that, of course, is that we all, I think it's probably human nature. We know what we need to do our jobs, but again, stepping back and looking at the big picture is the challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I think there's another bullet on here that I think is interesting too. And you work in an organization that has multi-departments, and the last thing you want to do is create an operations group that is constantly looking over the fence at other people's problems, focusing on, well, if they did this, then this would happen, or if engineering did this, then this could happen. We try and focus in on your own department stuff, because like we said earlier, there's waste everywhere. Like, you don't have to go looking in your neighbor's yard to figure out there's waste, you know what I mean? That focus on your own yard, focus on your own stuff, and let the other departments, if they want some assistance or if they want you to come over and give them a hand, then fine. But let's not turn this into a finger pointing exercise. Let's focus on our own things and work on getting a little bit better.
And like you said, looking at the process instead of the people, and that can sometimes be a challenge too, because of course a lot of times you tend to look at the person in charge of the process.
All right, exactly.
Curtis mentions that he's the most humble person he knows. I don't know. I might. Well, then again, it's definitely an ongoing challenge, and I like the concept of I talk about this with troubleshooting and with everything else, but bite-sized pieces, small daily improvements is much better, when everyone's involved with them, than one or two people doing something major.
Yeah, and back to my tier one automotive supply days, I think there's another big mistake that happened in the 90s and the early 2000s was these expectations were put in the hands of a very few people. So, the plant that I managed in Chatham, Ontario had 300 people on staff, and they had a continuous improvement leader and 2 other people that worked in the continuous improvement department. And it failed because they did not encourage input from everybody. They did not, drive this down to the worker level. It became 3 people that had these ideas around how things should be. And it was never focused on small improvements. It was never focused on culture development. It was focused on, massive concepts that they were trying to institute, and not the little improvements that make the big difference.
Right. And I know in past years, I think everybody gets guilty of that at some point. And then the question is, do you learn from it? And like you say, like I said, bite-sized pieces is sometimes a lot easier. And I mean, talking about that, the rest of what we've got coming up is just pictures and examples of, but this video is one that's is a really good example of it. And I'm going to see if I can. I'm not sure if I can. There, I left the sound turned off. But so, what's Alana doing here?
Well, Alana is, like it says in the PowerPoint, she's our newest hire on our light assembly team, working in the cables area. So this is a wire stamp machine. Because of our high mix, low volume nature of what we do, this machine gets changed over 25 times a day on average, say, each one taking up to 90 seconds. Just in the spirit of, we onboarded Alana with some basic concepts about what we expected from a continuous improvement front, and, walked up to her as she was doing this. One of the supervisors walked up to her while she was doing this and asked her, what the problem was or what she was working on. And the machine comes from the manufacturer with a little thumb screw right where her hand is there. And she's unscrewing this thumb screw that probably had 25 extra threads on it than what was necessary. She had to unscrew that, take the guide out, put the new guide in, put the thumb screw back in. And she said, this is a real pain in my butt. Like, if I could improve one thing today, it would be to have a solution around getting this thumb screw out and putting back in 25 times a day. She said she's dropped it before, it rolls across the floor, and she's looking for it. The machine won't operate without it in. So this was amazing improvement, and very touching to the leadership group in the operations team to see a new employee coming forward with this. She came with the problem, brought a guy up from the fabrication shop that has mill and lathe experience, and he looked at it and he said, give me half an hour. I think I got something that might work. He went downstairs, whipped up something on the lathe, came up. So what the solution was this, almost like a thumb screw that flips from a locked position to an open position. And, with one turn, she's able to open it, take the guide out, put the new guide in, and close it back up. So just rough estimation of how much more time the equipment would spend running over the course of a year would be 2.5 weeks, just by eliminating this little problem We've picked up 2.5 weeks worth of actual value-added machine time because she's not taking that thumb screw out and putting it back in. So really touching for everyone involved in continuous improvement in the organization, because, you know, like I said, we're trying to make a concerted effort of, you know, getting our newest employees involved right from the get-go. And there's no newer employee on our team than Alana Walters, and she pulled this off, you know, 2 months, there's 6 weeks into her existence with us. So very proud of this one, and a fantastic story.
So now going forward, we've got stuff from pretty much all areas of the facility. So hey, it's going to be like a little tour of Nautel while you're at it. So packaging, I mean, this is another good example.
Yeah, this was a big one that we implemented probably 18 months or so ago. The pictures on the top, the 3 pictures that run across the top, kind of show the way things were. So heat sinks are arriving, 1 to a box with the styrofoam dunnage in each one, and cardboard or paper inside of each box. So because of the way our operation is set up, this stuff has to come from the warehouse downstairs and go upstairs. And because of the size of the skid, there was no way to get it upstairs without unpacking it and putting it onto a different material movement cart. So we started looking at this and kind of wandered into the picture on the right with all the foam on the ground. A couple of us wandering through the area where this was happening and saw this, and was like, oh my goodness, you know, what's happening here? You know, he got involved with the operator and that was doing the unpacking. He explained the nightmare that happens when he's asked to do this. So you can see on the picture on the right the amount of waste that is going to landfill, blah blah blah. So manufacturing engineer grabbed a hold of this thing and started talking with the supplier about how we needed this to be better for us, and here's why. We don't want to be dealing with all this dunnage, and here's the problem it's creating for us. So the solution is the picture in the middle and the bottom. This is special designed corrugated dunnage that the supplier now supplies the heat sinks in, and they designed the skid the proper size for us so that we don't have to, you know, in order to get it upstairs to light assembly, we don't have to unpackage anything. So the picture in the bottom left is how we receive our heat sinks now. This comes up to light assembly. They pull the top of the box off, and the picture in the middle is how the parts are presented to our operators. So you can imagine the savings in this and the impact it had on, you know, our team that doesn't have to unpack this anymore, and our team up in the cell that is using these heat sinks. And then the real beauty of this is, you know, we shared it with the supplier, and the supplier jumped on board. I think the supplier understood immediately what we were trying to accomplish. And I think when we started talking lean with the supplier, they realized, man, we could really lean up our own operation. We could cascade this solution across an entire product family, start shipping to everybody, not just Nautel in this format. So amazing solution.
And I mean, I'll throw the challenge out to anybody watching that, you know, if you get something from us and you see where we could improve packaging, and keeping in mind too that the goal is twofold: reduce waste and make sure you get it in one piece. So, you know, definitely throw that information back to us, because that's something that we always do pay attention to.
That's a great point, Jeff. And this was, you know, this is not me or an operator working on this. Is our manufacturing engineer working with their engineer, you know, around proper number of flutes in the corrugated and that type of thing. This is a well-engineered solution that got us to where we want it to be. And so these are just, you know, random pictures of some of the hundreds of improvements we've made over the years. And, you know, Jeff and I talked about stuff that could hit home with some of the audience today. So picture in the top left is a water dispenser. And you guys probably say, well, how is that an improvement? Well, Jeff will attest to this. You know, at one point, Nautel had one fountain in the cafeteria, you know, massive 2-floor facility, 3 different buildings. And you had we had one opportunity to get water. You went to the fountain. And then we went to water dispensers. So we had water jugs that were brought in, stored in multiple different locations. I had operators on my team getting paged because marketing didn't have a water jug and they needed somebody to run that over there. So the amount of time we spent managing how much water we needed, where we're going to store the bottles, where we're going to put the empties, you know, just that waste of motion stuff we talked about earlier. And we found this water dispenser, filtered water solution, installed them in multiple locations around the facility and, you know, centrally located for different departments, and just eliminated the whole process of managing bottled water.
Yeah.
Pretty cool
And
solution.
that's one of those examples where a little more cost in the infrastructure resulted in multiple fold savings on wasted man hours.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, Jeff. I think if you don't include, you know, all this additional motion in your return on investment type discussions, then you could be missing out on, or you could be making the wrong decision on how you spend your money. And
Right.
So more pictures here. Kitting, you know, we've made some changes in how we kit parts. You know, 3 years ago, we were putting small bags inside of bigger bags, inside of boxes that went into bigger boxes, and, you know, putting labels on every single little bag, and, you know, spending hours putting kits together. You know, flip to more, in some situations, we flip to more of a Kia type setup where here's a drawing, here's a JPEG of what's inside the kit, the numbers and what they look like, and then just put them all in one bag and eliminate all that extra processing and non-value added activity. Picture on the right is, go ahead, Jeff.
I got to say, to jump ahead a little on the IKEA concept, I haven't seen it yet, but somebody somewhere is going to ask me if we provide the Allen key. And the short answer is, if you're buying one of our big transmitters, which do have hex keys for the AC connections, yes, we do provide the Allen key. All right, carry on.
In the high power connectors in the test room, this is a, you know, multifaceted improvement. It's a safety improvement. It's an efficiency improvement, because now we're able to connect our transmitters, you know, put the red one with the red one, shove them together and twist it, and you're ready to go. So that was a nice improvement for the test room. The picture of the little cart in the bottom, that was the original improvement we did, and probably the one that really started the entire CI initiative in motion. This is the faceplate off of our low power FM VS family, and you know, we're trying to get things going and try to figure out how to jumpstart my ideas and our thoughts on improvements. And guys in the fabrication shop were wrapping the front panels in bubble wrap and then taping the bubble wrap shut, putting them in a box, and then, you know, within 20 minutes, the box is upstairs in our light assembly area where the transmitters are going together, and the team upstairs is untaping them and taking the bubble wrap off. So, you know, we immediately looked at that and said, this is crazy. You know, the amount of time we're spending wrapping up these front panels, and they're going to go upstairs, you know, 55, 75 feet and take the tape off. So spun up a designer on these carts, and there's foam that goes in between each panel, and then the foam is reusable. So when the cart's empty, the foam comes downstairs, the foam dividers, and the cart comes downstairs to the fabrication shop, and it's reloaded and taken back upstairs. So this was kind of the one that really got us going and really got us humming, because there was a lot of people saw this improvement. We rapidly implemented something, and then they were hungry to get going with more, and from that really started the process of improvement at our place.
And it's one of those, it's like you said, it's the little things. I'll give you an example. In my infinite spare time, I was building a baby barn this weekend, because all the summer yard stuff needs a place to go for the winter, so I can put the winter yard stuff, get to it. And my carport is crammed to the point that the real boss looked at me and said, this might work in your workshop, but it's not working in our carport. So so I'm putting together this baby barn. Well, I'm using a barn style roof on it. So there are 28 rafter joists, all cut to the same length. And I mean, I just grabbed a couple of pieces of scrap wood and clamped it to the edge of my miter saw, so I could just slam a piece of wood to the end, run the chop saw down, flip it over, slam again, bang, done. And so cutting out 28 pieces of wood, you know, something that if I had to measure each piece individually, I'm going to have a much higher tolerance. And, you know, yeah. So building jigs is a perfect example of lean in action. It's just something to simplify the process.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple pictures of jigs that we've implemented in the fab shop in slides to come. But this is
This
really,
one, I like this one because this one is more about the happy people get more stuff done.
yeah. And this is this is good in visual management stuff. And like Jeff said, this is about, encouraging our people to be involved in more than just what they're doing. And, for those that haven't seen the facility before, these pictures, very, almost sanitary type paint. It was like hospital type paint everywhere you went.
Industrial, yeah.
Very industrial, right? And, this came from one employee. He came forward and said, could I paint my area? And my initial thought was, this does not sound like a good idea. What could go wrong was one thing I thought, and then I thought was, what if we go down this path? And I said, yeah, go ahead. And then the guy in the department besides him says, okay, I want to paint mine now. And we end up with this mishmash of colors. So through a concerted, a joint effort, made a decision that we're going to go down this path. I think marketing, said, okay, let's keep it within these accent colors, and kind of limited the colors he could use, and then said, yeah, go for it. And I think that was because we were a little hesitant around how this could go. But this is what it's turned into. He's gone to different departments. This is spreading across the entire organization. This, freshening up of the place, making it look amazing, making it look more comfortable for our operators on a daily basis. So that's great. And then the second picture this is Lean 101, and this is a good indication that our employees are starting to get the hang of what we're trying to accomplish. So this is the same guy that's painting our walls when he's got free time, or when we're working overtime, he'll come in and do this type of thing. But he designed this cart, and this has got lean principles all over it. So this is the paint cart that he's designed. So you think about waste of motion and wasting of transportation and all those things. If you don't have this cart, then he goes to where he wants to paint, and he's like, okay, where's my paint? Okay, I got to go get that. Where's my drop cloth? I got to go get that. Where's my, my turtle, or whatever you call that, green tape for taping off window? I don't have that. So this is Lean 101. He's got it all in one location: his paint, his rollers, all the paint supplies. And when he's ready to paint, this thing's on wheels, which is another thing that we recommend. Is anything you put on wheels, put on wheels. This thing's on wheels. So he takes this to where he's going to paint, parks it, locks the wheels, and he starts painting. So this is great stuff.
Well, and that brings up another concept. I'm going to flip ahead a couple and then come back. But one of the concepts, it's one thing to have all the tools in one place. It's another thing to know what you've got and where it is. And this is where I brought in the comment about my workshop, because my workshop looks much more like this before section.
Yeah, and I think this goes to being humble. Let's be humble about who we are. And there's all kinds of, this is never ending. There's all kinds of areas like this, and this is guys from our engineering team that use the engineering lab. We had some sessions with them about improvements and stuff, and they jumped into this immediately. So you imagine the number of workbenches that are out there in different manufacturing facilities and different people's garages that look just like this. And so what we did, what the engineers did, they designated a table that said, okay, we're going to take everything that we don't think belongs on our bench, let's put it on this table. And in the process of that, we probably identified 14 different socket sets and wrench sets. And the amazing part was they were all missing the same wrench. So let's just say half-inch wrench is the wrench of choice for Nautel products or whatever it is. That same wrench was missing.
12 millimeters.
Yeah. So that same wrench was missing from every set, and it was clear that the mindset previous to this was, well, let's just go get another wrench set, because there's probably, like I said, there's probably 12 wrench sets there, all missing the same wrench. So not a complete set on any of them. And then just a wide array of different tools. And if you go back one slide, Jeff, you can see where someone started into initiative before. You can see that one forward, there's a shadow board there where they tried to do something at some point, and it right there, and it didn't work and was not sustainable. So just the solution was that these guys came up with is one thing that Paul Akers sells is this black foam where you can cut out in the foam where the tools go. So just a real concerted effort around organizing toolboxes, making sure that things are where they're supposed to be. And one waste that we talk about all the time is just the excess number of tools inside of a toolbox. So if you open your toolbox to your wrench area and you reached in and grabbed a tool, what are the odds it's going to be the tool you're looking for? And how many guys have to empty their toolbox out, and the wrench they're looking for is right at the bottom. They're 17 3/8 wrenches come out and they're looking for the 7/8 or whatever. So this is just a way of making sure that everything's where it's supposed to be. Color coordinated by metric and imperial, and it's a really cool solution.
So I have to ask, and I asked this yesterday, and we're going to run, as always, about 10 minutes over time. I don't think we've ever finished at the top of the hour. I'd see no reason to start now. It will be recorded if you do have to drop out. But I want to know, I understand metric and imperial, and I just want to know how you identify the metric or crescent wrench versus the imperial crescent wrench.
It's a good question. You should open it up to the forum, and if anybody can get it right, they can have a book.
There you go, and be the left-handed metric wrench as well. Ron Zastro mentions that shadow toolboxes are fine memories of flight line days, and yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that the military excels at is organization. So but it is a good point.
Right, and then the whole idea is from a sustainability point of view is this is a shared toolbox in the engineering lab. So they've developed this to a point where if they open the toolbox in the morning and there's something missing, there's some accountability within that group. They go and find out where it is, get it back to where it belongs, and then friendly reminders to each other around let's make sure it's here, because if I'd have got into my day and I went to get this and it wasn't there, then I would have to stop what I'm doing and go find the proper tool.
Yeah. So Wayne's asking if the Nautel transmitters are metric, imperial, or mixed, and I think except for the output connectors, which are typically based on U.S. standards, imperial standards, I think everything else is metric. Is that not correct? That's that's a question for you there, Brian.
I said correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I missed that. So yeah, so metric all the way, and yeah, absolutely, it does present some challenges. I'm going to flick back a couple more, and yeah, say we are running close to time, but there's Scott doing the painting up there in the top left.
Yeah, that's our painter, Scott Wells. He's an amazing CI warrior. Jason Rhino is the second picture over. He's one of our lead guys on the punch press and press brake. This is a cool little solution is the monitor that he's got up on the stand here. So he's at the back end of the punch where the tool rail is. And so when he changes over from one setup to another, was walking to there's a panel, stand-up podium type control panel. He was either writing down all the tools that needed to go into each location and then walking over to the tool rack and installing them, or he's walking back and forth one at a time to figure out what am I putting in this tool position. So Jason came up with his idea around adding this secondary monitor. So Rand immediately came upstairs to IT. IT jumped right on it and said, yeah, we can do that. They ran a feed to this secondary monitor. So the monitor is displaying exactly what the podium control panel is displaying. So he can turn around, look at this monitor and install the tool rack and not have to walk back and forth. And similar to the story we shared about Alana, this is something, changing the punch over is something that happens multiple times a day across 2 shifts, across 2 facilities. So implementing this is, reduce an amazing amount of walking around and motion.
And that's one of the key sort of takeaways is that a lot of times you're looking at this and go, well, the extension monitor, that's the simplest thing ever. Why'd you wait so many years to install it? But it's so easy to get wrapped up in the mindset of we've always done it this way that you don't you have to actively be looking for the places where you're taking extra steps.
Correct, and this, I think it goes back to what we talked about really early on, is just teaching your staff what the 8 wastes are, talking about the 8 wastes, and then building up that trust and confidence with your staffs that we're you bring your ideas forward, and we're gonna implement them. Like we're gonna make a concerted effort to implement these good ideas. And the best part is, we're getting to a point where you guys like Jason are just grabbing a hold of this thing and saying, I don't have to, I know where to go to talk to who's going to be involved in this solution. I can get a monitor from IT and they can run some cable for me and I can implement this.
Right. And I mean, it's kind of cool because as we get more and more people on board with this, I mean, so you mentioned Alana being like 6 weeks into her job when she came up with her idea. And I mean, Alan, on the other hand, has been at Nautel longer than I have, going on 35, 40 years now. The
Yeah,
next
great
picture
point.
over.
Yeah, next picture over is Alan. He's been a part of the operations team for a long time. And there's plenty of examples of guys like Alan, where you're tapping into their resources, you're tapping into their knowledge set. And, at Meritor, we used to say, don't leave your brain in your car. We want you for more than just your backs and your biceps. We want you to come in, bring your brain with you and think about how we can make things better. And it's across the organization, there's lots of really good things happening, from the janitor right up to test techs and support and sustaining engineers, and
Right.
design
And
engineers. And
quick shout out there for anybody who's ever bought a Nautel transmitter. We get a lot of calls about the crates and the packing, and Alan came up with pretty much our entire packing system as far as how the crates are laid out. So that's yeah, he's been, like I say, he's been with us at least 35 years. I know the two ladies in the next side, I know Wanda's been with us at least that long too.
Yep, that's Wanda and Elaine. They did the kit. They've been involved in some of the kit improvements we made. Annette and Wendy in the bottom right, they do our PEM setting. They set all the hardware through the PEM setting operation. They came up with this idea about a Lazy Susan type tool holder, so that instead of having, there's two PEM setters that they work side by side. Instead of having two sets of tools, one set of tools on this Lazy Susan thing that we built that spins around, and they can share the tools back and forth. Us, Holly and Melissa in the bottom left, visual management tools around order processing, and so that everyone in the plant can clearly see where transmitters are in the process. So that's visual management work.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing. It's like I say, it involves everybody. And I mean, family ties. Patrick in the upper left is my sister's younger boy. So there's just, and he's down in test room now.
Correct. And another guy that came in and almost from the get-go was very excited about the culture that we're in the process of developing, the journey that we're on when it comes to improvements, and walked in and immediately pinpointed some stuff that we could get in place and work on, and just a real lean warrior as well.
Yeah. And I mean, Kelly up in the top right in reception. So it's like, yeah, it covers the whole facility.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's continuing to grow. Like there's good ideas coming from all kinds of different departments. And like I said, there's, Charlie at NMI and the team at NMI actively involved in all this stuff. And it's certainly not about me. It's not about, a certain small segment of our population. This is part of the Nautel culture that is really makes me proud to be a part of.
Yeah, and one of the things, we were for those that don't speak the acronym, NMI is Nautel Maine, our Bangor subsidiary, so their Bangor facility. So definitely that's worth noting that we do this. I mean, we've got the 3 manufacturing facilities. We've got Bangor, we've got Halifax, and then for the navigation or some of the sonar stuff, we've got CTEC in Ontario. So all of this information gets shared back and forth. Wayne Pacina had asked, how do you balance ease of repair versus ease of manufacture? And that is a judgment call a lot of times. And that comes back to the involvement of the whole facility, because you talk to the folks in support and production about repair as well as how easy to put together, correct?
Yeah, and it's all part of design for manufacturing discussions, and it's important to get input from cross-functional input from the team. Everyone that's going to be working on the equipment, not only putting it together but supporting it going forward. And we have a disciplined process around new part introduction, cross-functional meetings that take place, and it's certainly something we try to capture during that process.
Yeah. And so those are some of the pictures. We talked about some of the stuff with the tool and die organization and things like that. What are we looking at on the bottom right?
Yeah, this is you talked earlier about cutting wood and fixturing and how much that improves things. So this is multiple examples of some fixturing work that we've done so that we're, gang milling things. The sheets are stacked up and tightened down, and they run through operations multiple units at a time instead of one at a time, and constantly moving stuff in and moving stuff out of the mill. This is, the team downstairs, Scott Smith and his team, hundreds of ideas that they've implemented in improvements. And in the Fab Shop team at Bangor, the top left is just visual indications around, are all the tools where they're supposed to be? And then is the tool sharp or not? So the punch tools need to be sharpened after so many uses. So anything that's got a green on it is ready to go. Anything with a red on it needs to go through a sharp, needs to be sharpened before it's installed. So a lot of work on visual management, and just like I said earlier, just a concerted effort to reduce waste and optimize processes as best we can.
And so I'm going to throw this up, and anybody, of course, all the guys in the background, I can see the eyes rolling and go the after, and it's like this talks about the continuous nature. So what we had in our IT rack before was just a nightmare to work with, and what they came up with is easier, and there's still potentially room to make it even better again, but it's still a lot better than it was. And I think that's the big deal. You don't lose yourself too much on focusing on getting to perfect with the first step. It is a journey of 1,000 steps. Is that about the best way to put it?
Yeah, agreed. And I think, perfection is the enemy of improvement sometimes. And it's certainly been a challenge that we've had to accept and overcome on our own as we started into our journey, because there's a very strong engineering contingent on the team here, and it's different mindset for engineers that we just want to be a little bit better. We just want to be better today than we were yesterday. And
yeah.
And this is an example. This is an IT example that, like Jeff said, it's much better than what it was. And Jeff immediately identified this when we looked at it prior to this and said, could be so much better. You know what I mean?
But again, it's, you always, William mentions it as incremental process. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be better than it was. And that's a perfect way of putting it. In the design stages, we call it feature creep. You can, if you leave it up to waiting until the design is perfect, you'll never build a thing, because there's always that one more thing you could add or change or tweak. So yeah, that's cool. So the three summaries, because we are hitting 10 minutes past the top. I know folks have got other things to do with their day, but so these are your three big things, right?
Yeah, this is the message that we kind of deliver, with some frequency and some velocity, that we just want to make this as simple as possible. So our three pillars of lean and our improvement exercises are, just to make sure that everyone understands the 8 ways that we make a concerted effort to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday, and let's document our improvements so that we understand it's a journey, and here's where we are in our journey, and we can look back and say, we're making the incremental steps. So just keep documenting your improvements, and have fun through the whole process is an important one too.
Yeah, documentation is huge, because there are two things. If you got it right, then you can duplicate the result if you documented it so you know what you did. And if you got it wrong, you can learn from it and then start to disseminate where you should make improvements again. So hitting the tail end, this webinar, as with all webinars, is going to be archived. Anybody attending should get an email when the archive's up. I know Ed's really good at making that happen within a day or so. I give him a little bit of slack. Waves newsletter, YouTube channel. and definitely the online resources. These days, more than ever before, there are so many places to find information. That's a double-edged sword because there's good information and bad information. But places like Barrie, Michigan's Broadcasters Desktop Resource, radiolists.net, broadcastengineering.info, a myriad of Facebook pages on any topic you could ever hope to be inundated with information on. So, you know, just so many places to find stuff. By all means, feel free to reach out to me or anybody with a nautel.com email address if you think we can help with anything. On that note, Brian, I want to thank you for taking so much time out of your day with us. I know you're busy at the moment, and I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's awesome. And like Jeff said, if anybody wants to reach out through Jeff or whatever to talk lean, I'm always available. So appreciate the opportunity, Jeff.
My pleasure. And folks, thank you very much for spending an hour and 12 minutes of your day with us, an hour and 11, I guess, by the clocker on the wall. But it's been a great time, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, and have a great day now.